I had to take a little bit of time away from the channel, but I'm back and I just wanted to say this video is very special to me and I'm very glad you decided to come hang out and watch Holes, so let's roll film. This movie kicks off very briefly with a fella named Barfbag getting a little too tired of digging holes all day, so he rolls the dice and purposely gets bit by a rattlesnake to get himself an extended stay at the hospital. Then we pick up with the hero of the story, Stanley Yelnats IV, as he's reflecting on the events that got him on this correctional bus in the first place. While he was walking home one day, a pair of shoes with red X's on them fell from the sky and just landed on him. Then, before he knew it, police were rounding Stanley up and searching his room for evidence, which they found in the form of a poster of the superstar athlete Sweet Feet wearing the red X shoes. It also doesn't really help that his dad is a penniless inventor working on a cure for foot odor, so his house is covered in shoes and homemade equipment. Stanley's dad and grandpa, Stanley Yelnats III and Jr. respectively, blame all this on the one that gave them their family curse, and then they sing the following, and forgive me, I'm not a singer. If only the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the trees as soft as the skies. But that only upsets Mom, so they quit, and Stan reassures her that he doesn't believe in the curse anyways. But maybe he should, because the judge doesn't hesitate to give him two choices, jail or Camp Green Lake, where, due to an unfortunate rattlesnake incident, there's now an opening. Stanley quips that he's never been to camp before, so his fate is sealed. Okay, we're back up to speed. Behind the scenes, the producer, Teresa Tucker Davies, said it just wasn't practical to stay true to the book which the movie is based off of and cast a teenager that was just going to lose a bunch of weight by digging holes throughout the summer. So they gave up on that, and instead she was instructed to cast a young Tom Hanks. And then whenever she found Shia LaBeouf, she said that she found a mix of Tom Hanks and Dustin Hoffman. And hearing that now in 2025, it kind of makes me laugh, but there was a time where Shia was just a Hollywood superstar, so I guess hats off to her for that casting. Stanley makes his way past seemingly countless rows of holes that are either dug or being dug, and interestingly, he sees perhaps a mirage of a man walking with his donkey staring up at him. Next we meet the detestable Mr. Sir, who just happened to give up smoking, so he's chomping down on sunflower seeds to curb his irritation. But he makes up for it by being rude to the campers, like when he coldly warns Stanley that they have no guards because they have the only water within 100 miles, and how he's expected to dig a hole the length and width of a shovel every day. And lastly, he warns the newbie about the rattlesnakes and the deadly yellow-spotted lizards. You know, deadly lizards that totally aren't just harmless bearded dragons with yellow spots painted on them. No, nothing like that. Next, Stanley is handed off to Dr. Pendansky, who I'll refer to as Dr. P. He shows him the rest of the camp, like the bunks in the mess hall and stuff like that. Then he introduces him to a few of the other kids in his group, X-Ray, Armpit, and Squid. Armpit is asked to take over the rest of the tour, and Stan is introduced to the rest, Magnet, Zigzag, and Zero, who was unaffectionately given his nickname because he doesn't talk. And worth noting, even Dr. P calls Zero by his nickname whenever he otherwise stubbornly uses their real names. Stan unfortunately learns the hard way to use these nicknames after he calls Armpit Theodore and gets pushed over before getting the directions he was asking for. Stanley kills him with kindness and says thanks, and continues to do so even when X-Ray bullies him out of his bread at lunch for not digging today. Then, like any good initiation, Mr. Yelnats tells his new crew what he's in for, and then after he mentions the shoes were donated to a community center, everyone is shocked when Zero speaks to ask if the shoes had red X's on them, which Stanley confirms they did. Stanley's having a hard time settling in, so while he's trying to sleep through the snoring and the occasional farting, he thinks back to what his grandpa told him about the family curse and how unlucky Stanley Yelnats I was. He had the incredible misfortune of coming across the notorious outlaw, Kissin' Kate Barlow, after he had won all kinds of money in the stock market. Naturally, she took his chest to loot, but she only kissed the men that she killed, and instead ended up leaving him stranded in the desert for 16 days with no food or water. Stanley is then thrust awake at the ass crack of dawn so he can begin his 18 months of digging holes, so he and the others sleepily shamble over to the shed ironically labeled Library to get their shovels and start the day. It's clear that Stan is firmly on the bottom of the totem pole when X-Ray takes his shovel because it's the smallest, when the others throw dirt in his hole, and when they yell at him when he asks them to stop. During a break, Mr. Sir gives him the rundown that, effectively, he's just here to dig holes in the hot sun all day, but if he finds anything interesting, and the warden likes it, he'll get a day off. While coming to terms with just how grueling the next year and a half will be, Stanley thinks more about his grandpa's stories, this time about how his great-great-grandpa, Elia Yelnats, cursed the family. He was in love with Myra, so he sought advice from Madame Zeroni, who told him how to win his crush's heart and advised him to go to America where her son lived afterwards. To win her heart, he'd have to carry one of her piglets up the mountain every day and sing, again, sorry, if only the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was as soft as the sky, as the wolf waits below, so hungry and lonely, he cries to the moon, if only. Don't worry, I will not be quitting my day job. As the pig gets fatter, he'll grow stronger and have a suitable prize to offer Myra's father. Oh, the good old days, right? But she also instructs that afterwards, he must carry her, Madame Zeroni, up the mountain and warns that if he doesn't, he and his family will be cursed for always and eternity. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. When the day finally came to present his prize, Madame Zeroni described it best when she said Myra's head was as empty as a flower pot because instead of going with the obvious choice of the man who will love her, who worked his buns off for his pig, she wants the two suitors to decide by picking a number between 1 and 10. Feeling a mixture of heartbreak, anger, and humiliation, Elia storms off to America right away, but only remembers Madame Zeroni's warning when he's far out at sea. Back at camp, Stanley learns that Zero is by far the fastest digger, and he, understandably, is the slowest because he doesn't turn in until long after the others have. But while he's heading back to bed, Mr. Stir stops him with a revolver aimed right at him. Stanley is paralyzed with fear until Mr. Stir shoots right past him at a deadly yellow-spotted lizard. However, Mr. Sir missed, so the critter nearly ends the movie right there, but thankfully Mr. Sir doesn't miss a second time. Stanley is a kind and considerate kid, so after a bit of time has passed and he's settled in, he writes a letter to his folks, embellishing basically everything about the camp, writing about how great the swimming is, how the wildlife is cool, and how he's having a swell time all around. All lies, of course, but he doesn't want them to worry. Stanley notices Zero looming by, so he politely asks him not to read over his shoulder, and tragically we learn that Zero can't read, but he does ask his friend to teach him. But we know that Stanley isn't the fastest digger, so again politely, he tells him that he's too tired from digging all day and he just doesn't have the energy. While out on his next dig, Stanley presents Dr. P with a fossil with some fish, really hoping to cash in that day off, but he learns the warden couldn't care less about stuff like that, so back to your hole, child. Stanley infers the name Camp Green Lake isn't entirely ironic, and there must have been a lake here, so Dr. P gives him the lore about how the warden's grandpa used to own the lake, along with half the town that used to be here. Winding the clock back to those days, we see this used to be quite the bustling lake town, and amongst the crowd was a charming farmer/salesman named Sam. He was selling the town his miracle onion-based elixirs that could do anything from repel lizards to curing ailments. The author of the book and screenplay writer, Louis Satcher, cameoed in the movie as the bald guy in the market. But he talked behind the scenes about how the story started off as him just therapeutically writing about the unbearable heat of Texas after moving there from California in 1991. He then had the idea of the boot camp where the kids would have to dig under the hot sun all day, and he developed the story from there. He did add that from the beginning he knew the story would ultimately be about a fun adventure with escapes and treasures. But for his dear friend Miss Catherine, he has a special bag of onions which he trades for her jar of specially canned peaches, fair and square. Unfortunately, I do have to point out that a massive catalyst for this tale is how the times were very different back then and how the townspeople did not approve of their relationship due to horrible, antiquated ideas. In the present day, X-Ray interrupts Stanley's digging to bully Stan into giving him anything he finds since he's been here 6 months and no one has found anything yet, and frankly, X-Ray feels he deserves a day off more. Later that night, after Stanley is joining the others in the rec room, he is accidentally shoved into another kid and a fight nearly breaks out. Zero is quickly seen grabbing a billiard ball, but of all people, X-Ray steps in and breaks it up, so Zero quietly sets the potential weapon down. How odd. But Stanley is relieved to learn that he's finally earned the respect of his peers when he's dubbed Caveman, lovingly assigned due to the fossil he tried to use as a day off, no doubt. And now that he has a nickname, he definitely seems to fit in way more. Like, instead of being laughed at by the guys, he's laughing with the guys. Something like that. But one thing they don't seem to let go of is his relationship with Zero, and they even tell Dr. P in a group counseling how Zero only talks to Caveman, something Dr. P clearly resents whenever he accuses the kid of being silent because he feels like he's better than everybody else. Sometime later, everyone is out digging as they do, and while everyone is hoping against hope that this tiny little cloud will either give some rain or shade, Caveman is heaving this giant boulder out of the way to find a strange metal tube of some kind engraved with the initials KB. Of course, Magnet happens to notice and draws enough attention to get X-Ray involved, so he takes it for himself. Stanley starts to protest that he dug the entire hole, but after getting mean-mugged, he quickly changes his tone and says that X-Ray should wait for tomorrow since he's already almost done for the day. X-Ray can't argue with that, more of a day off. So the next day, while Dr. P is refilling canteens, X-Ray finds the metal tube, and sure enough, Caveman has to watch the warden come down and give him the day off and shower him, and ironically, extra shower tokens. Then she shows off her Spitfire attitude when she orders Dr. P to refill the canteens, and he protests that he's already refilled them. She counters with her signature, "Excuse me?" Then she proceeds to ask Caveman by his nickname to show that he's drunk from a little bit of his canteen to humiliate Dr. P for talking back to her. Then for the next few days, everyone tirelessly works to excavate all around the site where X-Ray supposedly found the tube, all while Stanley stares in wonder at the boulder that actually concealed the metallic object. Looking back at the past again, the market is empty due to rain, but Sam still wanted to give Miss Catherine her peaches, so he delivered them to her in person at her schoolhouse. While there, Sam notices a number of things wrong with the rundown building, so he says, "I can fix that," in exchange for more of her spiced peaches. He then explains that he's pretty handy. He even built his own bow so he can get to his onion fields, so the two have a deal. Naturally, the two would grow much closer during all the time Sam spent fixing up that old place, and Catherine would grow even more infatuated with Sam whenever he impressed her by finishing lines from the poem Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. And if you didn't know, that's a poem about how Poe had lost his lover to jealous angels, and remember that for later because I'm going to revisit it. Unfortunately, their growing closeness wouldn't go unnoticed, especially after the spoiled son of the town's owner, Trout Walker, gets rejected by the teacher and she notices Sam monitoring things nearby. Trout made it clear that he's not used to being told no, so gives the pair a threatening look on his way out. Sam always seemed to show up saying, "I can fix that," when Miss Catherine needed him most, and he does so on one lonely night, but sadly, the rotten Trout Walker was around to see them kiss. Soon after, the horrid townies demonstrate who's truly evil here when they show their displeasure with Catherine and Sam by burning down her school. Filled with terror, Catherine runs to the sheriff for help, but he makes it clear that he's with the other monsters. Then he tells her a sickening truth that would change her forever. It wasn't illegal for her to kiss Sam. It was only illegal for him to kiss her. Catherine bolts out of there to save her beloved, but it was far too late, and she watched as Sam was gunned down, rowing across the lake. Then she paid the sheriff a visit the next day to see if he still wanted a kiss that he had asked for the night before. Then after bringing him to the same fate as Sam, she gives his lifeless body what he asked for. Back at Camp Green Lake, they predictably didn't find squat, so they go back to digging individual holes. While Mr. Sir is filling canteens, Magnet lives up to his name with his sticky fingers and swipes the distracted guard sunflower seeds from his truck. He then goes about sharing the spoils with his fellow campers, but they panic when Mr. Sir 180's back and they all spill out over Caveman's hole. He tries desperately to hide them, but nothing gets past Mr. Sir, so he takes Stan back to the warden where things don't go expected at all. Stanley ain't no snitch, so he covers for Magnet by falsely confessing to stealing the seeds, but instead of getting punished, the warden acts rather stoically and asks for her nail polish. Stan notices Kissin' Kate Barlow memorabilia on the wall as he's fetching the nail polish, and while the warden's applying it, there's a really neat Easter egg whenever Stanley has to grab the rattlesnake nail polish and he sneaks a peek at all the Kissin' Kate Barlow memorabilia. He sees a newspaper that reads, "Kissin' Kate Barlow robbed Chicago Pacific," which is the name of the director Andrew Davis's production company. And even better yet, he cast his own grandpa, Nathan Davis, as Stanley's grandpa. She coldly tells him that the nail polish secret is rattlesnake venom, but adds that it's only dangerous when wet. She then turns her gaze to Mr. Sir for an explanation, and he assesses that Caveman is covering for someone, but when the two start bickering, the warden strikes her guard across the face, leaving him writhing in pain. To Stanley's surprise, he's dismissed without further incident. Everyone else is just as surprised as Stan when he walks back to his hole completely unscathed, but Stanley continues to be amazed when he finds his hole is already dug thanks to Zero. Zero admits that he knows Stanley didn't take the seeds, just like he knows he didn't take those shoes. Seems like Zero just wants to help turn his friend's luck around, so thanks to him, Stanley asks if he still wants to learn how to read. It is clear that Mr. Sir is not happy about the slashes across his face whenever he throws Squid for asking about it. Worse yet, he purposely neglects to fill Caveman's canteen the next day, meaning he obviously blames him ultimately. Zero sees his friend staring off into space, so he offers him some water and hears Stanley's theory about how his find might actually be lipstick belonging to Kissin' Kate Barlow. Cue the montage of her bandit antics. And I would do a bit about singing here, but I've sung plenty in this video, sorry. Zero's reading lessons seems to be going pretty well as he's already picking up on some four-letter words like rock, king, or zero. But Zero admits that his name isn't really Zero, then properly introduces himself as Hector Zeroni. In no time, the two work out a deal that Zero will help his mentor dig holes so that he has more time and energy to teach by the end of the day. Unsurprisingly, that doesn't go over well with X-Ray and the others, so they throw insults at the pair. One afternoon during a spelling lesson, Zero spells mom and trails off thinking aloud. He recalls how his mom loved him so much, but couldn't take him everywhere, so he'd often wait for her at porches or playgrounds, but one day she didn't come back. Zero has no clue what happened to her, but he longs to hire a team of investigators to find out one day. When he mentions waiting at Laney Park, Stanley gets excited after finally finding some common ground and shares that he went there all the time, but he gets a reality check when Zero shares that he was there to sleep in the tunnels. The chickens finally come home to roost during lunchtime one day when Zigzag starts to bully Stanley about his agreement with Zero. Then the Counselor of the Year, Dr. Pendansky, encourages Stan to fight back, and when he does, Zigzag beats him up worse. Now, Zero wasn't just going to watch his only friend get beat up, so he spider monkeys on Zig's back and knocks him out with a chokehold. To finally break things up, Dr. P fires a shot into the sky, probably killing an alien off-screen. Sorry, I'm just excited for the new Vegas season of Fallout soon. The warden shows up to figure out what in tarnation is going on, but it doesn't take long for the others to pin everything on the fact that Zero is helping Caveman dig. Stanley quickly explains that he's using the time to teach Zero how to read, but the camp leaders are appalled and forbid him from being taught altogether. They cite that that's why he's angry in the first place. Dr. P tries to demonstrate how futile Stan's efforts are, so he hands Zero a shovel, asking him to spell D-I-G. That, my friends, was the straw that broke the camel's back, so Zero high-fives Pendanski's face with his shovel and spits "dig" before he runs off into the desert. The warden instructs her lackeys to let him go, reminding them that they have the only water within 100 miles, and then back at camp, Dr. P reassures her and Mr. Sir that absolutely no one would come looking for Hector Zeroni because no one cares about him. Amongst others, John Voight, Tim Blake Nelson, and Sigourney Weaver spoke really highly of all the kids on set, saying that all 7 of them were perfectly casted and a lot of fun to work with. Voight himself said that all of them should be very proud of the movie that they made, and later, Shia talked about how he was just so starstruck working with such a legend. But I personally would have been more starstruck for Sigourney Weaver, but that's just me. Of course, Stanley would arrive just then to declare that they were wrong. However, to cover their tracks, the bad guys are sure to destroy Zero's file. Sadly, the other campers are just as callous, speculating that Zero is likely already buzzard food by now, but Stanley isn't so sure. He remembers his grandpa's story about the first Stanley Yale Nance and how he managed to survive for 16 days stranded in the desert, claiming that he did it by taking refuge on God's thumb. But no one knew what that lunatic was talking about since he was half crazy by the time they found him. Then Stan sees the rest of the world was quick to move on when a bus escorting the new camper, Twitch, rolls up. He was given that fitting nickname on the account of his Twitch that especially acts up around nice cars. While filling canteens the next day, Mr. Sir has to break up a fight between Squid and Magnet, so while he's distracted and with a little guidance from his new friend Twitch, Stanley presses triangle and steals the water truck. Too bad his first time driving goes even worse than mine, and he crashes into a hole, making it about 150 yards or so. When the cold-hearted warden gets informed, she tells Mr. Sir and Dr. P her plan of sweeping Stanley under the rug by waiting 2 weeks to report him. After that, the desert will have long since swallowed him up. The cast and crew spoke a lot about the conditions on set, and I gotta commend those kids. They did not have it easy. They experienced heat up to 120 degrees, up to 50-mile-an-hour winds, and the occasional sandstorm. Which makes me start to wonder just how many kids have gone missing here. Anyone else wonder that? Stanley now has to follow his great-grandfather's footsteps by wandering through the harsh Texan desert past yellow-spotted lizards. While doing so, he again sees an apparition, but this time we know him to be Sam. And speaking of, Stan eventually comes across an odd sight when he finds an overturned boat in this barren wasteland, and stranger yet, he sees some familiar orange pants sticking out from underneath it. He timidly calls out Zero's name, and after a few agonizing moments, Zero emerges from the boat. The two are incredibly relieved to be reunited, and Stanley tells Zero about his brief joyride on his way over, but with a disheartened look, Stanley also faces the truth that they have to go back. Zero firmly states that he's not going back, before changing the subject and giving his friend the drink that he's dubbed Sploosh. It turns out to be a very, very, very old jar of what they correctly guess is peaches. And it also turns out to be the very last one, so Caveman again says they have to go back. Stubbornly, Zero holds firm that he's not going back, and then he ignores Stan's plan about showing the warden where he really found the lipstick and absently asks, "What's Mary Lou?" After reading the letters across the boat, Stan informs his friend that it's the name of the vessel, Mary Lou. But then he notices something way off into the distance. He sees something that looks an awful lot like a giant thumb in the mountain, so the two set off to see if it has refuge after all. In tandem, the two carefully climb the mountain while motivating themselves by daydreaming about the spectacular things that could be up there, like ice cream, of course. However, at one point, while they were almost all the way up, Stanley nearly loses his footing, so Zero has to hold on to the sharp end of the shovel to save his friend. Making matters worse, it also turns out that climbing a mountain on a diet of 70-year-old peaches wasn't a great idea, and Zero nearly bites it whenever he faints. Luckily, his pal Stan returns the favor and saves him, and he even finishes climbing the mountain while carrying the unconscious Hector Zeroni. Upon reaching the summit, Caveman is beyond relieved to see that his great-grandpa wasn't crazy after all, and miraculously, he finds fresh water and plenty of wild onions for him and Zero to eat. And it may not be the ice cream they were hoping for, but it'll do. And fun fact, they were actually eating apples with an edible wrapping to make them look like onions. Worth noting, after Stanley has finally finished the climb and got a moment to rest, he sang the full version of the old family tune, If Only, If Only. Then at that very moment, something incredible happened back at home when Stanley's dad accidentally mixed a bunch of onions and peaches into his odor-curing concoction. After years of trial and error, he finally found the cure to stinky feet. I don't smell anything. After a few days have passed and Zero has regained his strength, he knows that he has to tell Stanley the truth. The truth that he was actually the one that stole Sweet Feet's shoes. Zero confesses that he was homeless and thought they were just run-of-the-mill donations, so he took them, but got scared once he heard everyone getting so upset that the shoes were gone. He panicked and threw him over a bridge, and, well, we know what happened to Stanley from there. But Zero confesses that he got busted stealing a new pair of shoes the next day. To Zero's amazement, instead of his friend being miffed, he just has a grin on his face, whispering that this is all simply destiny. Back over at the camp, things are starting to unravel for the warden and her lackeys when a lawyer representing Stanley shows up looking for him. Where was this lady earlier? Anyways, the warden's big problem now is Stanley's been gone for days, and he's likely buzzard food at this point. Night falls up on the thumb, and Stanley explains the family curse to Zero and adds that he's not mad about the shoes because this was all meant to be. And speaking of all that destiny stuff, once Hector makes out a shovel in the starscape above, Stanley admits that he's feeling lucky and asks his pal if he's up for digging just one last hole. Sam had finished the poem Annabelle Lee while fixing up Kate's schoolhouse way back when she was still just Miss Catherine, and if you recall, the poem was about Edgar Allan Poe's lover being taken away from him by envious angels. So it's fitting that Kate would choose this place to be her end after the jealous townspeople took away her beloved oh so many years ago. Now let's check in with Kissing Kate Barlow one last time. While woefully sitting next to her beloved's final resting place on what used to be the lake, a couple with ill intent find her and demand to know where she buried the loot since they saw her come out here with a shovel. Catherine actually recognizes the haggard man as Trout Walker, and the girl is a former student of hers, and she surely takes great pleasure in hearing that they've fallen on hard times because it hasn't rained here since Sam died. Trout tries and fails to get anything helpful from Catherine because, well, frankly, she's lost her will to go on. She curses them to dig for generations before grabbing a deadly yellow-spotted lizard and decides to be with Sam again. And she whispers, "Start digging, Trout." Stanley, Yellance IV, and Zero make it back to Camp Green Lake at sundown, where Stanley is quickly able to backtrack to the actual hole that had the lipstick because he marked it with that huge boulder he had to move. Zero has to break off to get his own shovel, but after he returns, the two hear something strange while expanding their dig site. And that's right, the two have found Kissing Kate Barlow's buried treasure at last. However, as they pull the chest free, lights bear down on them from the warden, Mr. Sir, and Dr. P. And if that wasn't bad enough, a whole mess of yellow-spotted lizards come crawling up from the hole, covering both the kids and the chest. No one is brave enough to reach past the lizards to retrieve the chest, so the Wicked Warden of the South plans to simply wait until the lizards send the kids to the other side. But then what she says next even seems to surprise Dr. Pendansky and Mr. Sir. "I'm tired of this, Grandpa." "Well, that's just too damn bad. You keep digging." Sigourney Weaver accepted the role as the warden because her daughter adored the book so much, and she was impressed that they had the author, Louis Satcher, pen the script. After she was sent the script and she read the book, she realized why so many people loved it. Her grandpa was none other than Trout Walker, and he went crazy making her dig holes every day, even on Christmas. The good guys have survived all through the night, so naturally the bad guys are starting to wonder why Stan and Zero haven't been bitten at this point. But we all paid enough attention to Sam selling his elixirs back in the day to know that the yellow-spotted lizards don't like onions, which is the only thing they've been eating for a while. Anyways, Caveman's lawyer shows up first thing the next day, so the warden tries to spin the whole situation into accusing Stanley of stealing her chest. The kids declare that to be a whole load of crap, so they defiantly climb out holding their treasure. However, it would be Zero that would notice the grandest display of cosmic irony and point out that it couldn't be the warden's chest because it has Stanley Yellance's full name on it, and it's really hard to argue with that. After everything they've been through, Stan refuses to leave without his best friend Zero, and then several generations of karma catch up with Camp Green Lake, and what makes it even sweeter is that the campers were there to witness it all. First, Zero gets to leave with Stan because the warden destroyed his file trying to cover up their tracks whenever he ran away. Second, the cops arrest Mr. Sir for violating his parole and then humiliates him by calling him by his real name, Marion. Naturally, Mr. Sir drags Dr. P down with him, accusing him of being a fake doctor. Then the officer in charge has seen enough, so he arrests the bad guys to announce a formal investigation of the camp. Lastly, after everything has been set right, rain would fall for the very first time since Sam passed. And quick tangent, I wonder if Marion was chosen as a nod to John Wayne, whose real name was Marion Robert Morrison. I don't know. Anyways, Stan of course has to say goodbye to his friends, but when he does, Armpit sends him off with a message to give to his mom that Theodore is sorry. And just before he leaves Camp Green Lake for good, we get a little cherry on top when the warden begs to see what's inside the chest, and Stanley counters with her signature line, "Excuse me?" And back in the real world, things start to wrap up quite nicely. The chest they found has riches beyond their wildest dreams, and Stanley is sure to split it with his best friend, Hector Zeroni. Of course, the family instantly recognizes the weight behind that last name and couldn't be happier. Speaking of, the little dude has used some of his newfound riches to hire those investigators and reunite with his mom. As for Camp Green Lake, well, it was shut down and the campers were sent to real counselors, but they all stayed in touch. In closing, we see that all of Stanley's friends gather around to see the premiere of their dad's new product, lovingly named Sploosh. And it even looks like they made things right with the superstar Sweet Feet because he was there too. And that, my friends, is how the great-great-grandson of Elia Yelnats and the great-great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni became next-door neighbors. I think this book and movie are so well loved because a lot of us find it relatable. Not in the literal sense where we got in trouble and had to dig holes, but how we find many people along the way that just become family. And, in this story, they get the best ending of all time where they get to take care of their loved ones and live just a stone's throw away from each other. And it's not exactly the ending that my friend and I had, but at least we had something very close for many, many years growing up together. And I just wanted to say that this one is dedicated to Dalton, who I love and miss so very much.